All right, all right, all right. Who can believe we're down to our last unit in Pre-AP Algebra 2 for the 2013-14 school year. Yay! So, this unit probably is one of the more important units for going forward to Pre-Cal Pre-AP. So you want to make sure you take some really good notes and really learn this unit, even though we're at the end of the school year and everyone wants to quit. So let's talk about trig. First thing, we have a right triangle. Want to make sure we remember that if that is theta, and all theta stands for is an acute angle in a triangle. In a right triangle. If that is theta, then no matter what, this side is always the hypotenuse. This side is the opposite, and the side right here is called the adjacent. Okay? And in a right triangle, we learn trig ratios. The sine of theta is the opposite over the hypotenuse. We learn that cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. We learn that tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. We learn this using an Indian tribe, Sokatoa. Sokatoa. This stands for, let me find that guy. Sine equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. Cosine equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And tangent equals the opposite over the adjacent. What's going to be new is that we're going to add 3 more trig functions, the last 3. So cosecant is the inverse of sine, which means that it's going to be the hypotenuse over the opposite. Secant is the inverse of cosine, so it's going to be the hypotenuse over the adjacent. And cotangent is the inverse of tangent, which is the adjacent over the opposite. The way I remember these is sine starts with an S, so it's in the inverse of sine starts with the C. Cosine starts with a C, the inverse of cosine starts with an S. Cotangent and tangent, these two are pretty easy to remember that they're inverses of each other. It's the other 4 that get mixed up. So, if I was asked to evaluate the trig functions of the angle theta, the first thing I'd have to do is I'd have to know which angle is theta. So we're going to put theta in this angle right here. And I can do the sine. So the sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. From theta, this would be the opposite. This would be the hypotenuse, and this would be the adjacent. Problem is, I can't do cosine because cosine of theta is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Now, I can find this obviously by doing Pythagorean theorem and do c squared minus b squared gives me a squared, or I could recognize that this is a triple in a 9, 40, 41. So this side would be 40. So cosine is going to be the adjacent over the hypotenuse. The tangent is going to be the opposite over the adjacent. The cosecant is going to be the inverse of the sine. The secant is going to be the inverse of the cosine. And the cotangent is going to be the inverse of the tangent. Let's look at some examples of how we would use trig. Again, this should all be review. If theta is an acute angle of a right triangle and tangent theta is 7/24, what is sine of theta? Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to draw a right triangle. Okay, and I'm just going to randomly pick theta. It doesn't matter because my answer will be the same no matter what. But tangent of theta is 7/24. And if you remember, this is the opposite over the adjacent. So this side is the 7. This side would be the 24. Now, what is the sine? Sine of theta equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. But I don't know the hypotenuse. And once again, if you remember that your triples, this is a 7, 24, 25, which means the hypotenuse would be 25. All right, next example is if I want to solve triangle ABC. Well, first, what does solve triangle ABC mean? It means find every angle and every side. Well, in this case, the angle right here is pretty easy to find. I just subtract 38 from 90 to get what that angle is. So angle A is going to equal 52 degrees. Okay, now I have the angles, and I have one side, but I need to find the other two sides. So I'm going to see that from 38 I have the opposite. So I'm going to find sine of theta equals the opposite over the hypotenuse, which I'm now just going to call h. The thing is, I know what theta is. I know theta is 38. So to solve for h, I'm going to multiply both sides by h and then divide by sine of 38. So h is going to be 7 divided by sine of 38. Now, please remember that when you're using your calculator must be in degree mode. Must be in degree mode. So I'm going to put that in my calculator, and I'm going to get that h is 11.370. So my hypotenuse is 11.370. I then can do another trig function if I want, or I can do Pythag. So now we're going to call this b, because it doesn't matter if it's a or b, and we're going to say c squared this stylus is going to drive me crazy. C squared minus a squared equals b squared. If I solve this, I will get b is 9.412. So I now know that b is 9.412. I have found all angles, all sides. I have solved the triangle. And right now I know you're all saying, what the heck is this? This blue over here on the right is a building with a window and red shutters, and the green is grass. I just want to remind you of a couple of terms. This line right here is parallel to my line along the ground. Okay, remember that these arrows would indicate that the lines are parallel. Okay, I know that x and y are going to be congruent because they are alternate interior angles. Anyhow, if I were a person standing on the top, okay, and I was talking about an angle of depression, okay, that this angle would be called an angle of depression. It's an angle from eyesight level looking down. Okay, think of people that are depressed. They look down. Okay, now let's look at this other one, y. Here is my ground level, and I want to know what the angle is up to the top of the building, up to the top of the building. This would be called an angle of elevation. Again, this video should have been, except for the 3 new trig functions, review. If this isn't review for you, then you'll need to make sure that you go into tutoring to either Miss Butcher or myself, and we will get you caught up with what you didn't learn last year. So I hope everyone has a great last couple weeks of school. Very excited for you. If you're sad at this point, you can come visit me at summer school at Conroe High School if you'd like. If not, then let's just do a happy dance together.